So that's pure sexism, pure, crude, child endangering sexism. I've only got two beliefs in my head. One, all people are equal. Well, I quickly found that doesn't apply in this business because of gender. And two, children are entitled to a childhood, irrespective of whether the parents are together or not.
Hello and welcome to the show where I try and make a little sense out of this stunning and increasingly brave new world that we all live in by talking to a series of expert witnesses about their experiences, interests and concerns. And today I'm talking to Vincent McGovern, who is the chair of the Central and North London branches of the shared parenting charity Families Need Fathers and the author of an extraordinary new book entitled The War on Dads and Children: How to Fight It and Win. The book describes the unholy war perpetrated by a myriad of state agencies, perhaps in some cases unwittingly, against loving fathers remaining in their children's lives post-divorce or separation. Vincent has had 5 ombudsman investigations to his credit, 3 of which were parliamentary. His credentials are exemplary. He's never been cautioned, charged or arrested. And yet, he and his children were subjected to the most appalling gender discrimination imaginable by multiple state agencies operating in secrecy. At the end of the interview, I'll let you know how you can download the most important chapters from this book entirely for free, and of course where you can purchase hard and digital copies of the entire book, as well as offering solid and sensible solutions to any parent seeking to protect their children from negative experiences in the family court. The War on Dads and Their Children also reveals Vincent's own experiences within that system. Experiences that have committed him to campaign against the current discriminatory and combative family court system. And so I began by asking Vincent what motivated him to relive what was clearly an extremely harrowing and personal experience in the opening chapters of the book.
Well, you're quite right with the expression, we live in that experience. And it's a horrible experience to relive. I don't care what you've done in life, and I've done quite a few different things. Nothing prepares you for the gut-wrenching terror of being framed by government institutions, effectively, as I was. And then the horror unleashed upon you when you try to unframe yourself, not so much in the family courts, but by the associated services, the pyramid structure that is so much of it. And I had never considered writing a book because I've never wrote a book in my life, until I began to realize I was getting nowhere with my ombudsman's investigations, of which I have 5, 3 parliamentary, 2 of those are into Kafka's, the Children's Court Advisory Service. I'd also managed to be a very important part of getting a EU Commission investigation into UK Family Court Services systemic failings. First time ever a nation state was subject to this in the history of the EU, EEC. And it was invisible. I mean, if they had me digging HS2, nobody would complain because they wouldn't know it's been dug. Right? So I decided to myself one day, hang on, it's about time I wrote a book here. And I didn't want to dwell on my own story because it's quite personal, and what importance is my story more than anyone else's? No more important. What I really wanted to get across though was the simple fact that a man and a father in modern day Britain is less than a black man was in the era of the Jim Crow laws of the United States, because I have quite a good knowledge of that history. And I saw extraordinary parallels between the Duluth model, which has been exercised by all the agencies in the London Borough of Brent, and the Court Advisory Service. Duluth being it's not the capital, it's the port city in Minnesota, where in the 70s a bunch of academics come up with this jokingly almost a flip side of Jim Crow laws for treating men, with the patriarchal theory and all the rest.
Yeah.
And that became written into the practice. That is standard practice. I couldn't comprehend this in the 21st century, particularly, of course, would apply to me, because I always believed, like every other fool in society, that there's rights, equal rights, you're innocent until proven guilty, all this sort of thing. Of course, in the family court gateway introduction system, yeah, it completely stood on its head. Guilt is determined by gender. You're denied the opportunity to present your case. You're denied the opportunity to hear the evidence against you. You are framed very effectively. And I said to myself, well, as I'm unburdened by intellectual education, I cannot be sacked from my job because I'm semi-self-employed for most of my adult life. I thought, let's go on the attack. Someone once said, you're a bit like Don Quixote, tilting at windmills. I says, you're mistaken. He only had one at a time. I have wind farms. I have a target-rich environment, Brian.
Well, I have to say, kind of, one of the most kind of positive aspects about this book, and kind of, I guess, kind of one of the reasons why it's important that it was written, is that it kind of documents a number of your actual successes. You have had victories, kind of over the years, and some of those have been very significant. And I have to say, kind of, while your story, your own personal experience didn't surprise me at all, and I'm obviously kind of very familiar, or well,
same here.
Not personally, but kind of certainly familiar with so much of the
process,
the obstacles for others and men in other sort of areas where the law intervenes. But I have to say, I was surprised at the extent of how embedded the gender discrimination is into the actual, because I think at least one of your complaints did acknowledge that there is kind of a gender discrimination embedded into the actual system. It's not just that sort of some of the services, the charities that are perhaps kind of lobbying and influencing are having
it's their system.
Yeah,
it is their system, and I think it is totally embedded. It's the DNA of it.
Yeah, and that and I kind of I certainly understood that to a fair degree. I suppose the likes of the violence against women and girls strategy is a very overt and obvious example, because clearly it excludes men. But I think there was one example.
Brian, did you know that in the violence against women and girls strategy, in September 2016, the Crown Prosecution Service under Dame Alison Saunders was including statistics on violence by women against men under violence against women and girls. And they're getting more funding based on those figures.
So just to repeat that, you're saying...
In September 2016, an article in The Guardian by a columnist called Ali Fogg demonstrated, this is first discovered by William Collins, I might add, no surprise there, demonstrated that statistics by the Crown Prosecution Service in the UK, or in England and Wales, that violence by women against men was officially recorded, by the police, etc., was recorded under the violence against women and girls umbrella.
Yeah, sorry, I'm with you.
The figures were higher, which meant they could get more funding based on the more examples of violence against women and girls.
Yeah.
I mean, it's some perfect Ponzi scheme.
Well, it's, the shocking thing about this is that anyone would, kind of conduct such blatant discrimination, just purely kind of based on sex and, ideological perspectives, I guess. But the very fact that the very fact that it's kind of professionals within the system, and that was I was trying to find it. There was there's somewhere in the book where I think you had established that was it Brent Council's domestic violence services. Oh yeah,
corporate strategy 2005 onwards.
Yeah, specifically.
Would only accept evidence from, I quote, female survivors of domestic abuse.
Yeah. So
that was a freedom of information request.
Yeah,
by my MP, and they spent 8 months refusing to answer that question.
Yeah, that, which is quite remarkable.
It's astonishing.
It's
sickening.
And particularly, because that's we're going to talk about the dispatches episodes in a little while, and it's something that kind of strikes me. It's just remarkable sort of at different stages in this process, whether it's MPs or whether it's professionals, and whether it's for ideological reasons or whether it's because they're afraid to necessarily rock the boat. You see a system which just kind of pushes out very emotive arguments about vulnerable children, but completely excludes a major cross-section of the population. And it's not just fathers, it's children as well, because they don't fit within the narrative.
Well, that's why the title of the book is The War on Dads and Children.
Yeah.
And why, as you say, the MPs and all the rest, my better half came up with the idea on the scales. Because you got a man on his own chained and the woman with the children on the opposite side, with the full support of the state assisting them with the scales of justice. Now, that is not 100% applicable. It is 95% applicable. Because there are mothers who lose out terribly in this process. There's no doubt about that. And I've helped some of them. Sure. And I see it's a duty to help them in my voluntary work for a shared parent charity. But the system is designed very simply. Any allegation against the man is accepted as absolute evidence. If the man questions the evidence, he is guilty, of course, of uncontrolling behavior, which is now virtually written into law, I might add. Practice Direction 12J, things like that. You're not allowed to cross-examine. It's a litigant in person, a man, is not allowed to cross-examine the accuser in family court because it'd be too distressing for her. Now, what I find disgusting about that is this. Many, many years ago, I remember reading about, before the Taliban started back in the 1990s, things like that. I remember reading about very senior Muslim clerics who were the spiritual advisors to the Taliban, as it were.
Okay.
And one of their beliefs was that the reason why women always have to be chaperoned in court and outside the home and all the rest is because, according to their tenet, should we call it, women are incomplete in faith and logic. Therefore, they cannot make independent decisions for themselves. And I thought this was absolute barking lunacy when I read it. Now we have the DV lobby effectively saying the same thing, the polar opposite, that these poor little women can only be allowed to make accusations, but must not be cross-examined on them in court.
Yeah, and we should emphasize these are allegations, these are accusations, these are not proven in any courts. And often
I've never seen a criminal court in my life other than as a witness a few times. When I was caught a few naughty people in the past. The police have never interviewed me about my case. I've never had an interview, phone call, nothing.
For the benefit of kind of people watching this, do you want to kind of briefly sort of talk us through your personal experience? Because
very briefly.
Yeah.
I was a house husband for 9 years to 1 and then 2 and then 3 children. And I was also looking after renovating the family home and another property we had. And endless work, but I didn't mind. And the mother was a high-flying medical professional, extremely hard worker. And after 10 years of marriage and following a bereavement in our family, the mother suddenly decided I'm surplus to requirements. Out of the blue. We had no prior arguments or anything. I had no idea about this.
Okay.
I refused to leave the family home, which had been bought less than 6 months earlier, when she asked me to remove my name off the deeds. Of course, looking back, it was very obvious why, but I didn't know then. I was so naive and stupid. And I refused to leave. She made things unbearable. The children were suffering terrible stress. And the next thing was I found myself subject to what's called a case conference. And I hadn't seen any evidence or anything else before that. The constitution of the case conference was, the mother's cronies, basically. Our business partner, members of our staff, and work colleagues.
Just to clarify, what was the conference about?
The conference was meant to be about the children.
Okay, so it's about it was about custody of the children.
No. The conference is about how to help the children.
Okay.
Meant to be. Now, I also knew that the mother had been in regular contact with the local Brent Domestic Violence Advocacy Project / Women's Aid. That's aid with an E, all right? And I knew that those long, lurid details going in about me to them, as she regularly told me. I didn't know about the dog, I have to say, Shadow, but the phantom dog.
Okay.
So my solicitor said absolutely no way should this case conference be allowed to take place with that constitution, because the process for the case conference is under what's called the MARIC process, Multiple Agency Risk Assessment Conference. And there's a whole process before this, you see, before the case conference was called, which I knew nothing about. And in this MARIC process, the mother had been for hours given evidence to Brent Domestic Violence Advocacy Project / Women's Aid. And their constitution and practice is that the perpetrator must not be told of the evidence.
Just to clarify, sort of at this stage, allegations of domestic abuse were being made by your wife about you.
Yeah.
Now, and this sort of, were there any sort of allegations before the separation? Or?
Nothing.
Okay.
Nothing. No,
Okay,
not a hint. The previous 10 years, no such thing. And I mean, at that stage, I'd never had a computer or mobile phone or anything else. So the learn neither had money. But I knew that this is all, as far as I'm concerned, a bunch of loonies that the proper courts and police would see through. So I was having delusions of, I'm okay, I haven't done anything stupid, don't do anything stupid. That is my mindset, no matter what the provocation.
Sure.
Now, I'm a very patient man, but when you see the children being abused, to then get a reaction to you from you, that is very, very hard to tolerate, let me tell you. And I'm scarred over that. But I'm scarred over lots of things. So this case conference, my solicitor said, absolutely no way should it happen. He's a former judge for 10 years because you have this whole process before a case conference.
Okay.
And I had asked the Brent Domestic Violence Services for help, and I was refused.
And did they? What reason did they give?
They told me to contact the solicitor. Didn't give a reason. And I'd also asked the National Domestic Violence Helpline for assistance, because when the children started being abused, to get a reaction from me, I knew I wouldn't be able to tolerate much of this. So I had to get help. Simple as that.
Okay.
And I couldn't get help. Now, I knew there's no good going to Brent Social Services, because that's like a black man going to the Ku Klux Klan. That's absurd.
Okay.
So I already knew that anyway. I mean, the whole mantra in the local newspaper, their Brent magazine and all the rest was one-side narrative. So I knew better than touch them. For very good reason, I might add. So the case conference took place with the panel I've described, and I'd sent in a handwritten letter requesting that it be an independent conference. I desperately sought help for the children, and could some measures be put in place to protect the children and myself from further abuse. And the next thing was, I got a huge amount of paperwork from the court process services, 6 o'clock in the morning, because the mother took the children and disappeared. I was getting no help whatsoever from Brent Social Services. And she then obtained an injunction ex parte, means without notice to me, and about 4 other court orders from a hearing I knew nothing about.
Okay.
So I found myself 24 hours notice to vacate the family home, not waived to the children or anything, who incidentally have been the primary carer for 9 years. And if anyone else were to waive at them, that she considered to be set up by me, I would be arrested automatically for harassing, pestering, and annoying. So everybody I knew who knew her was, yeah, go on.
No, I was just going to ask. I mean, you were saying that at the at that conference meeting, you were kind of making it clear that from your perspective, both you and the children were receiving or experiencing abuse by the mother. Now,
oh, absolutely.
Now, obviously, I don't want to kind of probe too much into this, but so that, in the case of the children, particularly, would this have been in any way physical, or are we talking kind of emotional abuse?
Well, this is all brought into the family court, so okay. I can't comment on it.
You can't comment. Okay, yeah, I'm with you now. Okay.
I have to say though that the family courts, had a completely different view than Brent, I might add, and Kafka's.
Okay.
In my case, but they ended up in front of circuit judges.
Yeah, and it'd probably be useful just at this point, just to sort of, for anyone not aware, there are very strict secrecy clauses around family court proceedings.
Back in 1960. Yeah.
Yeah. So you could actually
I'd be automatically jailed for contempt of court.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm not interested in selling my freedom that cheaply. Writing that book, I may have touched on the borders, perhaps, but I'm not interested in selling my freedom cheaply. Sure. Just to say that there was a return hearing within a short space of time, because the first hearing I wasn't notified of it. And the judge was very angry at the later hearings. The first one I was on my own. And the mother's counsel was doing the hyena outside act, trying to set me up, wind me up, whatever. And the judge was angry about what he saw as backdoor social justice, social engineering, and all the evidence was forced to come out of Brent.
Okay.
And I also got some evidence to the side door from Brent at a later date, because I know how dishonest Brent are as an institution. Anyone who doesn't believe me, just read Lord Layman's report into Brent in 2001, like Brent Children's Services and the like. I'm not saying anything that's not in the public arena. He castigated Brent Children's Services and Social Services. And it was in that evidence, the 11 pages, that I found out about I'd had repeatedly kicked and then killed the family dog. And you being a man from the north of Ulster, and I'm from the bottom of Ulster, I was also accused of repeatedly going into local border towns in the 80s with a firearm over my shoulder, often to shoot dogs for hire. Can you imagine the life expectancy of walking into a border town with a firearm over the shoulder?
And shooting anyone's dogs. Yeah. Yes. Well.
And I was processed on this by Brent Marek process. And at the case conference, the verdict only on this evidence was brought, not the evidence. I never saw the evidence then. Only the verdict was that I was a danger based on the evidence received. Well, based on the evidence received, I made Genghis Khan look like a peace hippie.
So, I mean, essentially what you're saying is those allegations were put forward against you. You weren't told what they were, so you had no way.
That's the Constitution. The perpetrator must not be told. It's the Constitution in the BDBAP and Brent, Domestic Violence Corporate Strategy.
And what would your perspective on this experience with the dog be then?
Well, we never had a dog.
Is it too soon to reveal that? Okay.
We never had a dog of any sort. To either kick or kill. I wouldn't have killed a dog, obviously. We never had a dog. Yeah. Because when she was given evidence, if we can call it that, they said to her, because I have all this in writing since, that there wasn't enough evidence to get an injunction. All right? Because all she had was, she doesn't like me. I don't even like myself at times. And then they said, has he ever been known to abuse animals?
Okay.
That's a more critical test, you say.
Yeah.
So suddenly, Shadow to the rescue.
Okay.
All right? And of course, the gunman along the border shooting dogs for hire as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's would be difficult enough. Certainly, I know what, kind of processes in terms of kind of like exchanging information across borders or whatever. Presumably that would be difficult, but not impossible to establish and sort of, kind of once, but certainly the dog thing, we very quickly be able to establish kind of whether or not you ever had a dog.
Well, I have 19 witness statements in court that we'd never had a dog.
Yeah.
I have 29 witness statements. I was the children's primary carer for over 9 years, including a Freeman in the City of London, superintendent of police. I was on the residence committee for a number of years in an area where everybody knew each other quite well.
Yeah.
And myself and the children, I used to have them in buggies. I'd be going around collecting signatures and what have you over a controlled parking zone near Wembley Stadium, you see, which we live not far from. So I was very well known, and I had some great support and assistance from people there. Invaluable. I wasn't able to fight myself for a while.
Sure. No, because I mean, I guess, the process you're describing, many fathers would just back off and, potentially give up because of the, there's so much complexity towards it. It's emotional. It's impacting the kid.
Oh, it's totally overwhelming.
Yeah.
And you see, most fathers, what they do is to go around to the social services office or to go around to the former matrimonial home, jumping and shouting, and they get arrested.
Yeah.
That's what you're designed to do.
Yeah.
That's how it's set up. And then you're just an official statistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I smelled a rat. So I decided, like that all great intelligent people, to do nothing. Okay. Until I got my brain functioning again.
Yeah, makes sense.
I could live in a garage that I owned before the marriage.
Okay.
I could afford the rent of the garage because I owned it.
Excellent. Yeah, that's handy. Yeah.
All right. And I had fantastic support from family and friends, which enabled me to start getting together a fighting fund, engage a solicitor, and start being able to get a campaign going. And I couldn't work at the time because I was crippled with arthritis. I waiting my first hip to be replaced. Sorry, we surfaced that one. Next one is replaced. So I had no choice but start writing lots of longhand statements. Then later on, I got a computer with a friend and a printer. And it was the practical help from family and friends that enabled me to survive. Because a lot of ordinary people mightn't have that support around them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was,
and that is absolutely crucial.
And in terms of kind of timeframes, how long did it take from, you know, kind of the separation, the first kind of step of separation to establishing custody? I'm not sure. Can't remember. Was it joint?
We ended up with shared residence 2 years.
Shared residence. Yeah.
Yeah. That the shared residence came about, I believe, in 2010. There's three years of constant litigation, about 35 hearings, and most of them I was a litigant in person because I went out of borrowed money after 4 or 5 earlier hearings. So I had a contest, find a fact 3-day hearing. I had a very good Mackenzie friend helping me there. I emphasize without him, I would have been in trouble. I had a couple of other 3-day, another 2-day hearings. But you see, I'm a motorbike restorer and engine builder.
Yeah.
To me, building a case, once I transferred the mind, building a case is like building an engine.
Yeah.
And then you see how it'll perform. So once I got my mindset around to that, and I could begin to type, okay, one finger prod, you know, I got there. I could begin, well, I had people typing for me in the beginning because I couldn't do it myself. I could type up statements that look professional. And my brain began to function again after about 4 or 5 months. It took that length of time now for my, whatever passes for an intellect with me, to be back to where it should have been. Because I was just in shock.
Yeah. I mean, that's entirely understandable. I mean, and again, I appreciate you can only go into, you know, certain details, but I mean, you know, kind of having established that sort of allegations like killing your dog when you didn't even have a dog.
Didn't have a dog.
Presumably that was established and understood at some point. So was there
the court straight away threw that not sensibility, they called it.
Yeah. Okay.
I know the court, but the problem was, you see, the Court Advisory Support Service, Kafka's, they worked hand in glove, that particular lady, hand in glove with Brent. So I was a perpetrator of domestic abuse, serious domestic abuse. And also by denying it, I was refusing to accept my part in being a domestic abuser.
And why do you think they, as you say, kind of worked hand in glove?
Well, because at the first meeting I went to with Kafka's, they sent me out when I defended myself over the phantom dog, for example. And when I came back in, they were reading the BDVAP evidence against me.
Okay. So
for evidence.
So, but, you know, because we're talking about professional people working for councils and statutory agencies.
Yeah.
Now, are they, I mean, essentially, were they essentially taking the allegations at face value, or do you think there were other kind of reasons, whether that's kind of prejudice because of your sex, or whether it's you know, political perspectives, you know, kind of why were you treated so unjustly?
Well, if you look up Children and Family Court Advisory Support Service, Kafka's, the agency, they regularly refer perpetrators of domestic abuse to, only deals with males.
Yeah.
They have no concept that females can be guilty of domestic abuse. They refuse to accept it. And when I put this to them, their argument is that if a woman is physically violent, it's because she's in fear of the stronger male.
Yeah.
So it's purely gendered. Guilt is determined by gender with those people far too often. Now, I emphasize, not all Kafkas are rogue, but they're in a very bad system. when you have them working hand in glove with unregulated, unaccountable agencies and local authorities, and when their own policy is to only accept a commission agent that has a one view, straight from Duluth once again.
Yeah.
So that's pure sexism, pure, crude, child endangering sexism. I mean, I emphasize, I'm not a men's rights advocate. They can go and fight for themselves.
Sure.
And most of them, as far as I can see, aren't doing a very good job, but that's their business, not mine.
Sure. Okay.
My whole angle is this. I've only got two beliefs in my head. One, all people are equal. Well, I quickly found that doesn't apply in this business because of gender. And two, children are entitled to a childhood, irrespective of whether the parents are together or not.
Yeah.
Right? I never had time to mourn my marriage because I was so busy fighting for the children and to be able to be involved with them. Yeah. So that is my battle. If you have a cold and you walk down the road and someone fires a shotgun behind your ear, you'll quickly forget about your sneezing and your sniffling.
Yeah.
I had a far bigger game in town.
Yeah.
So I had no choice but adjust. It is either adjust or lose. Sink or swim.
Can I ask you, some people suggest that 50-50 parenting should be, basically the default option, whilst others take the view that has a negative impact on children. Do you kind of what's your perspective?
And that's by all means you can ask. I have a long held view on that.
Yeah.
I am not. UKIP was the only political party ever that had 50-50 in its manifesto for shared parenting.
Okay.
I am not, I emphasize, a 50-50 man.
Okay.
Simply, so that's sort of straight away. But it should be the starting position and move either side depending on the logistics in question.
Yeah.
Schools, the housing, the employment, whatever. All right. It should be the starting position, but it should not be sliced down the middle straight. I don't believe in that. It does work on occasions. See, the bottom line is that the UK government is set up totally for one parent good, one parent bad. So the good parent is automatically the mother in their mind, 95% of the time, has the children's allowance, all the rest, can decide who's on the birth certificate, everything else.
Yeah.
And the father can support her while she agrees with him supporting her, to co-parent the children.
Yeah.
And once she decides she wants rid of him, then the state comes in to help her get rid of him. With all these domestic violence agencies, social services, and every other name and acronym you can think of. I mean, this is a vast 387 thereabouts million income per year. This is a vast industry.
Yeah.
Kafka's budget is 1 billion per year. And I've had two parliamentary ombudsman's investigations into them. And I have never, I've been a witness in court, as I told you earlier, where I caught a couple of people doing naughty things. As far as I'm concerned, a lot of those people are engaged, maybe not deliberately and possibly not even financially, but they're engaged in what I would call criminal enterprise in actions and methods.
Do you want to say a bit more about that?
Well, what I mean is that when you have a local agency, like in Brent, for example, that I know so much about, but there's other boroughs, where the well-funded domestic violence agency that is in charge of council policy will only accept evidence from one group of people, right, based on gender, okay, which immediately excludes half of all parents from seeking help.
Yeah.
That to me is criminal enterprise. I make no bones about that.
Yeah, well, it's certainly, at the very least, it's, goes against everything that's in the Equality Act in terms of protection from sex discrimination.
Well, you see, the Equality Act doesn't apply. This is where 90% of the fathers should come to the meetings. Come in, as I did myself, come in under the belief that the Equality Act applies here. It does not. It is qualified, not absolute. And that loophole is massively exploited by these, what I call gender vigilante agencies.
It's qualified, but it's not excluded. I do appreciate that the kind of reality on the ground and the way it's exploited.
Yeah, exploited. Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Particularly by charities. But the likes of Brent Council, for example, they're a public authority. They have specific duties. So even, I suppose the example would be, they have a duty to provide services to everybody in the borough.
That's correct.
If they're providing services for victims of sex discrimination, they could possibly use the exceptions to those rules to provide a segregated service.
Yes, it's a segregated service.
But by not providing
if you go into Wembley Police Station, it's adorned with posters from the BDVAP, Bent Domestic Violence Advocacy Project.
Yeah.
That's their working agency, their partnership. So, what you said there, I absolutely agree with, should apply.
Yeah.
Problem is, it totally doesn't apply.
It doesn't, yeah. No, I get that, and it's shocking. It is absolutely shocking.
Oh, it's sickening, absolutely sickening.
But it's sort of, I suppose the thing I like to keep emphasizing is it is against the law. But
the law is only relevant if it's applied.
If it's applied, absolutely. 100%.
Otherwise, it's just written statements.
One of the most shocking stories that sort of, I came across in the book was your description. It wasn't your own personal experience, but it was a description of somebody who worked for Brent Council, I believe, who made kind of false allegations against another father. She accused him of, I think abusing the child at a sort of joint custody meeting or something. But basically, I mean, they were found to have. Let me find
I'm curious.
Go ahead.
I'm curious as about that. It just doesn't jar with me at the moment. I want to find out more.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to be reminded.
Let me just find that. Yeah. Here we go. So basically,
what page, Brian, please?
It's page 59. And my apologies.
Okay.
I think actually, sorry. It was someone from Kafka's, in fact. It was a lady called Susi Smith.
Oh, that lady.
who was arrested.
Oh, I don't need to look at the book for her.
Yeah.
I do not need to look at the book for that. Oh my God. What? Yeah.
And I think this says so much about how kind of embedded this attitude is within the system.
Yes.
Because, I mean, there are two quite shocking aspects to this story. The first aspect is that so let's see, she falsely accused him of sexually touching his daughter during a contact session.
During a supervised contact, yeah. Jonathan Copeland, it's well publicized.
Yeah.
Observed by her. That's nothing to do with Brent now. Brian, can I just emphasize, that's nothing to do with Brent. That's purely Kafka's.
Sorry.
Brent are innocent here.
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
Yeah, no, that's fair. No,
I could tell you worse about Brent, but I'd have difficulty in getting it through the law. Yeah. I can tell you a worse story about Brent in that situation. Not regard to me, but we leave it one side.
Yeah, well, there's some pretty damning stuff about Brent in this book as well. Excuse me. But yeah, so not only is it shocking that sort of she did this because it was established it was a false accusation.
Totally criminal what she did.
It's criminal behavior, and she was arrested. But so then she so she, if I'm right, she was sacked from Kafka's.
Correct.
But then there was the
inquiry.
Healthcare Professional Council. Do you want to tell me about that?
Well, it's absolutely staggering because I've helped some of the people, not this guy, I emphasize. I've helped other people who had the benefit of being treated to her kindness. They, from memory, the Healthcare Professional Council ruled that she should not be struck off as a social worker because when she made the allegations about Jonathan Copeland, she was angry and disorientated. But she was not angry with him. If she was angry with him, they would have struck her off.
Okay.
So she made allegations that he sexually touched his, I think it was a 6-year-old child that he'd reared since birth.
Yeah.
All right. He'd reared this child since birth. The mother had many, many issues. Let's put it politely.
Sure.
And now I know nothing about the case personally, other than what I've read. And yet she was allowed to keep working as a social worker because even though she made the criminally false allegations, an £86,000 payout to Jonathan Copeland, she was angry, but not angry with him. Talk about letting off the hook. That is absurd contempt of language.
Yeah. And they find that she had not acted dishonestly.
It's mind-boggling. It's Kafkaesque.
Yeah, and that's it. It's sort of one of those kind of mealy mouth things where you're kind of presenting one side.
It's the equivalent of the inquest used to find years ago in the old apartheid South Africa, where they found that the deceased had repeatedly headbutted the policeman's boot. I just not. That was one inquest. So you had the same sort of absurd contempt for any concept of rights, justice, or anything else.
Yeah. And
and this is from the regulatory body,
yes.
CPC.
Yeah. And I think, pretty helpful to emphasize. Kind of like, some people might actually take offense that you kind of equate this to the likes of Jim Crow laws, or you kind of mention, you've
apartheid South Africa.
Apartheid South Africa. Yeah. You're born in Northern Ireland, where.
Well, I don't want to go into Northern Ireland politics now because I'm too close to it.
But you'd said you experienced discrimination there as well, and it kind of just didn't, that personal experience pales in comparison to what.
On the subject of Northern Ireland in relation to this, here's a wish I have, that we'll have the same outcomes, broadly speaking, in the UK family court system as there has come about in Northern Ireland social circles over the last 30 years. I grew up in the 60s and 70s and for a while in the 80s. It was actually toxic then. You don't need me to tell you that.
Sure.
Look at the huge improvement now. It's not perfect, never will be perfect, but it's infinitely better. I hope to do the same thing to the UK Family Court Gateway Services. Remove the institutional malpractice, remove the paramilitaries, as I call them, and a proper professional, impartial professionalism. Child-centered, not gendered.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. The one observation I'd make about Northern Ireland now in terms of, kind of domestic violence services, I know very little about, kind of the family courts, but the public authorities that, the laws that came in around anti-discrimination, particularly around Good Friday Agreement, and put sort of strict laws on non-discrimination in public authorities.
Yeah.
Has led to a slightly less gendered approach, but it's taken a while to bed in, and it's very much in danger of kind of, going backwards.
Slipping back. Well, another example I give is the Catholic Church in Ireland, when I was growing up, was omnipotent in the Republic.
Sure, yeah.
And among sections in the North as well.
Yeah.
And yet within 3 to 5 years, it has self-destructed from the mid-80s.
Yeah.
And it became subject to the disinfecting of public scrutiny in courts. And what the problem there was that a few paedophile priests were being systematically protected by a corrupt system.
Yeah.
And that's why I look upon the family court and the gateway services here, that I want to force scrutiny upon these malpracticing agencies. Because to me, the only thing that counts, you asked about 50-50, to me, the only thing in this business that counts is the welfare of the child is paramount, Section 1 of the Children Act. Yeah. That means every other law is secondary and irrelevant in comparison. Well, I entirely agree with that principle. I entirely disagree with the subversion of that principle by these agencies. That's my battleground.
Yeah. And it is very much embedded, and that's another thing I note from your book is kind of when you're talking about Kafka's, you're kind of sort of roughly dividing, in terms of your perception of the people that work there. A lot of people are just going on to get along, so not wanting to rock the boat. A small percentage may, certainly particularly at the start, try and influence change. Yeah.
Try and do the proper job.
And then you will have others that are very much.
There's some criminals there
committed to that.
Yeah. There's more than one Susi Smith in Kafka's. I have often worked with independent social workers in my career when I was a Mackenzie friend. Yeah. And many of the best independent social workers are ex-Kafka's officers who left in disgust at Kafka's malpractice.
Yeah.
And I'm talking females, not men. I'm talking females.
Yeah. 85% female.
It is quite... Well, it's 83% female, which incidentally is the same makeup of all the public sectors in the UK.
Yeah.
But 83% female.
Yeah.
So you got a kind of one narrative fits.
Yeah. And that, kind of even with itself, kind of, if that percentage was the other way around, there would be quite reasonably, concern about, the potential for whether it's unconscious bias or just a lack of kind
That's
of
right.
experience and
Absolutely.
knowledge of
Yeah.
kind of the other perspective,
Correct.
so to speak. So that goes without saying.
Absolutely.
I
Well,
wanna,
for example, Brian, sorry, you want to ask? Go ahead.
no, go on ahead. You make your.
Well, you were asking about a social worker. A social worker I knew quite a bit about, never met, tried to expose malpractice in her department in Haringey, and was threatened with having her children taken off her. I wrote about it in the book. Nevres Kamal is her name. You know, this system is ruthless as self-protection. A lot of people don't understand that. Now, I've caused a couple of officers to have be going garden duties, because the way the system operates is that if someone becomes a liability to their system, they're jettisoned.
Sure.
Dumped. Right? But nobody from inside is allowed to effectively complain. That's not an option.
Yeah.
And you can look at Nervous Kamal, you can read about it online, read about it in the book, and you can see why people go along with the system. It's better.
Kind of significant change rarely comes from within whenever a system is corrupt. And it is
absolutely.
It is
it has to be forced.
Yeah. And it is quite remarkable, the sort of degrees that kind of apparently, ethical and professional individuals will potentially go to protect themselves from even just the sort of the suggestion, not even of malpractice, but just of poor decision making. Or
that's right. Well, I wrote maybe too many pages on that based on my opinion. It's nearly all in the first chapter, which is one of the longest chapters. Now consider this, I think it's about chapter 3 or 4. I had a brief run in with what I call the Apostles of Excellence, the Brent Local Council Chief Safeguarding Board, who were doing a presentation on the poor innocent child Daniel Pelka, who was basically beaten to death, killed by a lunatic, psychotic mother and her equally psychotic new boyfriend. And at that presentation in Brent, which I attended in another capacity I have involving children in Brent, 70 minutes of the presentation was very beneficial and developmental. And then suddenly along comes Brent's favorite hobby horse, domestic violence. So the whole thing was subverted into 1 in 3 women subject of domestic violence, blah, 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 blah. More children are killed in the UK per annum by mothers than by fathers. Yeah. William Collins has kindly submitted the data for that in my book. And it can be looked up on that. He's called the 19 as a 330, later 332 homicides from serious case reviews and coroner's reports. Yet we virtually now, in fact, I've never heard it said in mainstream media. Jess Phillips is openly contemptuous of it, a member of Parliament for somewhere in Birmingham, former director for Women's Aid. And she is brilliant. She is absolutely brilliant at shutting up any man who wants to raise any questions about men's and boys' issues. Because she just started accusing me of being a rape apologist in Parliament, as she did with George Galloway years ago. Now, George Galloway is a bit of a firebrand. He's not going to back down. And there's only about 2 MPs prepared to fight. One is Philip Davis from Sheffield, and the other one is a guy called Ben Bradley. Yeah, two working class Tory MPs. There's nobody else prepared to head above the parapet, because you're going to have this caucus shrieking at you, accusing you. And many MPs, when they've been up against some of these feminist MPs, including Jess Phillips' own opponent, I can't think of his name, he's a brilliant man, John Hemmings, will suddenly find themselves subject to sex abuse allegations around about the time of an election.
Yeah, I'm familiar with John.
It's become quite a common practice.
I'm familiar with
so
John.
No man wants to rock that boat. It's career ending.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. It's not just career ending. I mean, sort of those sort of allegations, stick with you for the rest of your life. I'm familiar with John Hemmings' case, and you're correct. The kind of Jess Phillips was very vocal about those allegations, particularly during election time.
Yeah, which were totally spurious.
Yeah, which absolutely proven to be exactly that. I mean, I suppose that kind of leads on to the subject of false allegations, because
it's an industry.
Yeah, well, certainly, the likes of Jess Phillips would say that, kind of full, and indeed Keir Starmer during his time as public prosecution.
DPP, yeah.
Yeah, he oversaw a paper which proposed that the proportion of false allegations in the system were so small as to be practically impossible to measure. And William Collins has again been very helpful in kind of clarifying the sleight of hand involved in that particular equation. But I mean, sort of, I suppose certainly false allegations have a major part to play in the story of family courts. I mean, you've obviously
at least 70%.
Experienced that.
Professor Tommy McCoy of Strathclyde at University a few years ago did major research into this. So also has Professor Nicola Graham Kivan, Dr. Liz Bates, and about to be Dr. Deborah Powney. Yeah. I occasionally work with those esteemed ladies. And of course, the one of the most knowledge of all, and I'm greatly appreciative of a forward in my book, Erin Pitsey.
Yeah.
I mean, you know very well her opinion on what a fraudulent agency the domestic violence has become, and what a fantastic income generator.
Yeah.
I mean, basically they're building up a huge property portfolio that's unquestioned, unregulated, with false allegations themselves. They depend on false allegations. It's an industry.
Well,
I'm not saying all allegations are false.
Of course not.
Certainly say.
No, and that, I mean, to be honest, again, that particular subject was one of the things that kind of motivated me to, I suppose, kind of, get involved with this debate, because it's quite shocking to learn that people that kind of, and again, I'm thinking of people like Jess Phillips, who are kind of purporting to be the defenders of some of the most kind of vulnerable people in society, are
hijacking it,
prepared to, and have been proven to be making kind of false claims, or kind of bigging up, emphasizing false allegations.
Yeah.
Kind of
bear in mind, they will never use the word false allegations.
Okay.
To them, a woman make an allegation against a man, either if it's not proven, doesn't mean it couldn't have happened.
Well, that's true. That's true as well in terms of the actual kind of the mental
absence of evidence does not necessarily mean evidence of absence.
Yeah.
As far as they're concerned, even if you're not guilty, you could be guilty. The training by Dr. Bianca Jackson, Quorum Law Chambers, on coercive controlled behavior, brought in 2015, is that, you can look it up on our website. If a man is silent, he may become violent. Therefore, he is coercive and controlling in his silence.
And again, that's entirely gendered.
Totally. So you cannot not be guilty.
Yeah.
Plus, of course, you see, you have patriarchal theory, because men earn so much and waste so much time with all the poor little quislings of females working for them, as if the vast majority of working men are on crap wages. You and I both know that.
Yeah.
But so you see, you have pure gendered. Well, I look upon it as a gender supremacy movement for many years now. It had legitimacy one time, no doubt about it. And what sickens me is that they are totally unconcerned about genuinely poor, hardworking women.
Yeah, or children, which is
definitely children.
The thing
children are just being weaponized.
Yeah, that
being weaponized.
I mean, I can't. That's the aspect that is kind of most shocking about this, and it's kind of, and
that's what drives me. That's what drives me.
Yeah, I think it's kind of what drives most people. I mean, for those listening that kind of may be questioning, kind of how prevalent false allegations are, because it is the thing that's kind of very hard to kind of nail down and prove, because these things never go in front of a court of law, and even when they are kind of found in front of courts, they tend to be, for kind of various reasons, the judge even kind of plays them down in findings. The one kind of area which strikes me as kind of a major kind of benchmark in this is the change within legal aid, and then the increase in the number of false allegations.
Oh yeah, 2013.
Yeah.
Legal aid, sentencing and punishment of offenders absolutely solidified gendered malpractice in the distribution of taxpayer funds, and led to a 300% rise in allegations of domestic violence.
Yeah.
So before 2012, there was 300% less men violent than after 2012.
Yeah. And they
that's Ministry of Justice statistics.
Yeah, and to clarify, kind of the change was that you couldn't get legal aid in those circumstances unless the moment
that has been muted. I knew exactly where it was going. I spoke about this. I was ridiculed, and also there's 300 extra father suicides that year.
Yeah.
It went from 4,600 to 4,910.
Yeah, and I mean, because obviously it's a life change.
It has a cost. Yeah, it has a cost.
Yeah.
I know through my voluntary work and my former McKinsey work, I know men who've stopped themselves because of this. I know men who have had mental breakdowns. I know men who have become homeless.
Yeah.
And people say to me sometimes, you have a hard approach. When you're in the war zone that I am, you better drop the little nice fluffy pink penguins. Doesn't apply here. This sometimes has brutal consequences. Now, we always say to the people at the meetings, try and get in and get out as quickly as possible. Try and have as little complication as possible. Because the more complication, the more agencies involved.
Yeah.
The more agencies, the more delay. The more delay, the more trauma for the children and for the parties.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the end of it, neither party has a clue of what it's about quite often, male or female.
Yeah. And that, again, that, is a kind of fairly well reported kind of outcome that kind of, neither parties are happy, potentially have spent thousands, if not millions.
Oh, everything they have, quite often. Everything they have.
And recognize ultimately that the outcome for the children, is...
Well, the children by then are so damaged that if you got the children, you mightn't want them because they're so damaged. They're going to be so violent towards you because of the shock and horror they've had to go through.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the most disastrous thing of all here for children is an adversarial system with one side, 95% the mother, given the full protection of the state. The average father believes when he goes to court to try and see his children, it's just an argument between him and the mother. It's not.
Yeah.
It's an argument between him and the state propping the mother at her limited taxpayer funds.
Yeah.
And highly gendered bigotry.
Yeah.
Far too often. Not always, but far, far too often.
And that, I mean, I've heard it said that to kind of come through the system and win essentially in terms of the outcome that you're looking for, and maybe this is slightly unfair, but in terms of going in front of the family courts, to get the outcome you're looking for in terms of your children, you either have to be a woman or a psychopath.
But I'd agree. I wouldn't totally disagree with that.
And I'll just clarify that isn't a slight against women.
No. But I understand where you're coming from.
How loaded the system is.
But if I can also explain something that's very important to me, the more toxic end of the court process and of the allegations and all the rest are only from a small percentage of women, most of whom have psychological or personality issues.
Okay.
We're not talking women in general in society. That's why people say to me, are you anti-feminist? Not in the slightest. But there's an element of them I consider criminal.
Yeah, absolutely. But
that's a small element.
But I suppose the other aspect is that, I mean, the bottom line is that sort of any parents that find themselves in front of a family court are almost definitely not in the best state of relationship between the two partners. So they're looking for adjudication. And in terms of exploiting the system or gaming it to your benefit.
Yes, that's the whole problem. The gaming of the system and the fact that so many vested interests earn excessively good living ideologically and financially from being involved in the system.
Yeah.
You should have what the continent has, an inquisitorial approach. Allegations of a criminal nature should be dealt with in criminal courts. Simple as that. From either side.
Yeah.
Right? That's the only place for criminal behavior is in criminal courts. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm curious to know your opinion of the secrecy of kind of family courts. I mean, I get your point. The secrecy of family courts. I get your point that sort of, unless there's a proven case of abuse, it should be seen as unproven. But kind of, another aspect of the kind of the whole family court system is that there's no reporting allowed. So it's impossible to know how.
There is a pretend system to allow some reporting. Effectively, there's none. I am not for every parent's petty little details and squabbles being brought into the public arena.
Sure.
Like Johnny Depp, Amber Heard kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right? And where there's children involved, and obviously there will be children involved, the parties' identities should be kept secret and anonymized. Okay. But in an era of social media, that has now been bypassed by technology to a large extent.
How do you mean by that? Sorry.
Well, either sides, if you are on Facebook and you've got 300 followers, for example, or you're part of 300, either side is going to be talking about their opinions on the other.
Okay.
So there's 300 people who know well about the other party.
Although, are there not kind of quite serious implications, though, if then the other party brings...
Well, there's not really serious implications, which is why there should be far more transparency. And also, that would get rid of a lot of the false allegations, because it would be held up to public scrutiny and ridicule far quicker. And so would the action of a lot of these agencies. Secret justice is natural injustice. It's inevitable. Yeah. Because it may have started off well, but it quickly gets corrupted by subversive elements, I call them.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'll give you a chance, kind of, if there's sort of, particular things that you kind of want to say at the end. The one thing I wanted to kind of make sure we kind of covered before we finished was I wanted to kind of emphasize the kind of positive aspect about this book, because if you're, particularly if you're someone who is personally experiencing or knows someone who's experiencing the sort of treatment that you've talked about in the family courts, this conversation could be quite despondent and put you off actually kind of keeping up the good fight. So I do want to emphasize that. Do you want to say a bit about sort of, a key aspect about this book is the you. Go ahead.
Thank you for that very informative comment there, Brian.
Sure.
Because the book's in 4 sections.
Yeah.
As it says in the introduction. Okay. And the last part is about how to survive and fight in the system. How to be litigant in person, how to work with Mackenzie Friend if you have no money. Mackenzie Friend is lay advice on the family court. Yeah. How to deal with social services and all the other paraphernalia surrounding it. That's also available for free, those 2 chapters, on the www.londonfathers.com website.
Okay, I'll
I want to enable ordinary people to be able to be better armed to give themselves a chance in this process.
Yeah.
So you're quite right about the part we've had has been quite despondent, but it's also depressingly accurate. So you have to go through that to get to the next stage, because for most fathers who enter the family court, this comes to them like an avalanche, and they can't deal with the avalanche.
Yeah.
So if they understand that the avalanche is the system, you survive the avalanche, and then you come out the other side and you learn how to function and fight. See, I absolutely believe that knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And without knowledge, we are lost. I also believe that because I've very poor educational qualifications, I got a leaving certificate back in 1976. First I got I meant I could leave the country. So I did, became a labourer, high quality position. That if an ordinary person like me, who spent all my life either as a motorbike courier or a house husband or a barman or a scaffolder or labourer, if I can get somewhere, there's no excuse why a lot of ordinary people couldn't fight far more effectively.
Yeah.
Now, I feel sorry for the ordinary decent guy who smashed in the process at an early stage and hasn't the extraordinary support I had from family and friends. But I want this clearly on record. I am absolutely disgusted by the amount of highly educated men who, as your program states, the glass blind spot, do not want to engage, do not want to protect children, who want to believe the narrative. They have my contempt.
Yes.
They know better.
Particularly, I suppose my contempt is particularly directed at people that understand, because I think sort of quite often until you kind of come up against this, sometimes you kind of believe the propaganda that you hear all the time. So if you've never experienced,
it's unrelenting.
Yeah, but for those that sort of understand the discrimination and the difficulties that this system creates for society, and particularly for children.
Yeah, and particularly for children.
Yeah, they would have my
contempt. Which I don't forgive it for. I will not forgive it for that.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. Let me think. Yeah, I mean, I suppose the final thing on that, I would ask, what would you say to someone who is just kind of finding themselves in front of a family court, or finding themselves having to negotiate, kind of access to their kids or shared parenting, and finding it's become a hostile situation, potentially with false allegations as well? What would you say to somebody starting down that road? What advice would you give?
Watch The Simpsons.
Okay.
Because you're going to be protected. You're going to be projected as Bart. Sorry, Homer.
Okay.
That if the children are with you, there's no lunacy you won't subject them to. All right? You're a total, radical, violent, drunken idiot by and large, or variations of it. And the mum is Marge, a saintly do-gooder. Right?
Okay.
And you have to become that absolute idiot Ned Flanders.
Okay. So, yeah.
A goody two-shoes of absurd. I slightly jest, but not by much. Not by much.
Well, that's certainly something that comes out in your advice, which is, you've got to the do's and don'ts lists, and
yeah.
some a lot of it's kind of helpful in terms of the kind of technical process, but a big aspect of it is about keeping your calm.
Oh, absolutely.
Working with the courts and not.
Yep.
Kind of.
Oh, if you don't do that, you're just gone.
Yeah.
As they do to tens of thousands every year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Give yourself a chance. The judges, and to an increasing extent the magistrates, who shouldn't be there in the first place, but leaving that aside, because there's far less judges now, and they're doing it on the cheap. The judges and the magistrates are humans. They're there all the time. They've heard every combination of story imaginable. They're not interested he and you are denunciation of the mother. She this, she that, she the other. Shut up. You and her produce children.
Yeah.
Bring solutions to moving on, or what you can bring to the benefit of these children. Drop any delusions of using the court as a vehicle to get back at the mother because she made allegations against you, or she performed with your friend, or whatever else.
Sure.
That's history.
Yeah.
It's co-parenting now as far as you can. And there's no good saying that she won't allow it, because I keep hearing that she. Get off the Stockholm syndrome. You're an individual. You're a father. You're worthy of respect. You have children. Yeah. They love you, even if they don't know how to express it. Give them the chance to have a few years involvement with you. I know enforcement is woeful, but it's only really woeful when the children go past 10. So, stay involved with the children as much as you can. Keep calm, keep focused. Drop all the illusions you have about right and wrong, integrity and justice. Doesn't exist in this business. You're in a different world. You're in a completely different alien environment, because it's an adversarial system. To itself, it makes perfect sense. And it's like swimming or cycling. There's actually very little about it that's technical at a normal level. But when you've never been involved in it, it blows you out of the water in the beginning. And that's when the vast majority of fathers give up. Yeah. Then they come to us for help after they've given up, or been blown out of the water, or fallen into the myriad traps that set there.
Yeah.
But what annoys me more than anything else is the amount of men who talk a lot of hot air, but will do nothing about the system after they know about it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I got no respect for those guys. And I'm certainly not interested in hearing their opinions, because that's all they have.
Yeah. And you're involved in Family Needs Fathers in
I'm
London.
the chair of Central and North London branches for 10 years actually now.
Yeah. And I'll leave
as an aside, Brian,
them as well.
Some of the older campaigners from Fathers for Justice over the years, I got to know a few of them, quality men I might add, and women. And they all tell me the same thing. The worst thing that ever happened to campaign for shared parenting was social media.
Okay.
Because everybody became an armchair warrior with calluses on their fingertips from expressing their opinion.
Yeah.
They're no longer prepared to be activists and doing anything. I'm not saying what they're doing is right. I certainly don't approve of blocking motorways when fathers may be trying to go and collect their children.
Sure.
Court order or something. All right. But they were doing brave actions. I know several of the people involved, and they all say the same thing, that the development of Facebook and social media was the end, as far as they can see, of shared parenting campaigning. at grassroots level.
Yeah, and that would strike a resonance in terms of thinking about the profile. You know, you used to see a lot of reports about Fathers for Justice, for example.
This cathedral, that cathedral, Buckingham Palace, what have you.
Yeah, and you don't, and you know, I certainly, you know, the social media thing is it's absolutely a poison chalice. I do think in some regards it has kind of made it harder to avoid some arguments. I think, you know, kind of like a positive aspect might be, for example, it was evident the amount of criticism that the Dispatches program got, because it was 90% of kind of commentary under Channel 4's postings. But I agree. I'm conscious that sort of, the sort of work that I do is very much, it's media. It's kind of, sort of trying to get a message out, but it's not that, it's not.
You are. I mean, I'm not comparing you to the armchair warriors.
No, but
their opinion.
I get that, but it's,
a complete difference. Knowledge, until the knowledge is more widely disseminated by channels and vehicles such as yourself and others who have some knowledge on this subject, who can ask relevant questions, who have enough knowledge to not be, oh, gee, I couldn't believe this. Yeah, what, yours and a few others like you, it's a very important role that's done. And the ICMI, the International Conference on Men's Issues, that's increasingly more important. They're good enough to give me a slot there on a couple of occasions, and including yourself, obviously. So you see, that is where social media has a valuable function. It's like everything else is a tool. It's how it's used.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've, kind of ultimately, I've kind of worked out what my skill set is, and what I can do to be most helpful. And I think kind of the main thing I'm trying to do is just sort of document some of this so that the generations that come might potentially see it.
Right.
But the frustration
lost.
Yeah, but the frustration is
very important. Very important.
Frustration is that absolutely, it's hard to get a message past people who already know. And I do understand that a big frustration is that there needs to be more done on the ground, and particularly, kind of where people have gone through these processes. I think, you're a great example of this, that, people helped you and now you're helping people in that situation.
Including the charity, Families and Fathers, was a big help to me at the time.
Yeah.
Because I could not believe the knowledge that was there and access to that knowledge, and it is freely given.
Yeah. And that,
it's absolutely excellent knowledge.
And that sort of knowledge goes whenever people go. So it's important that other people, get involved. And, I know that's a common criticism, that a lot of people will take help from these bodies and services, but then won't necessarily. The thing I was going to say, I was asking you kind of what you would say to somebody who's maybe kind of starting down that, the horrible road of family courts. The observation I'd make, and I'm not trying to, kind of blow smoke up your ass or anything, but the observation I would make is that you are a great example of the fact that you can win, you can get through the system.
I wouldn't call it win, but you can get through. You can get a result. You can get. I got 6 years shared parenting with my children, two of the younger ones particularly. I wouldn't have had only for the course.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sorry, you're
100%
right. Win isn't the right word.
No, the word win doesn't apply.
Yeah.
But I had 6 years of shared parenting I wouldn't have had only for the course.
Yeah.
And that's priceless, quite simply.
And that, and that's an example. And as you say, kind of, you've had no kind of formal training or qualifications, or whatever. I increasingly think kind of, the more time people spend at university and stuff, potentially. The more learning is sucked out of them.
I occasionally give lectures on alternatives to domestic violence at a couple of universities. And one of them is the law faculty there. And the first time I went there, I was quite frightened that these law students would take me apart. Oh my God. I might as well have been explaining to the wool after this clipped of sheep.
Sure.
Yeah, it was so benign. A few younger women doing the faster courses on degrees to be into the police, they will engage effectively, very effectively, because they're curious.
Yeah.
The young men, well, there's 22, so they're men, to just sit there sullenly looking at me, right? Because they don't like what I'm saying. They want to attack me. They know it applies to them, but they don't want to accept it. What you said earlier on about how people don't want to have their perceptions altered.
Yeah.
Oh, no, you. And of course, you're going to get a few glassy-eyed feminists looking at me with pure hatred. But hey, you know, I've had so much of that, like, I'm not too worried. But the only people who will effectively engage will be quite often younger women. And I'm talking effectively engage, not just ask the pat questions, because I have contempt for the pat questions. I want questions to put you under pressure, because only then are you going to get answers of relevance.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that, you know, that again, you know, kind of just kills, you know, it obscures the lie that this is a, you know, a sex war issue, or this is a, you know, kind of gendered issue. It is, you know, kind of course, if you're a woman with any decency, you're going to be concerned about the kind of implications in family courts. I'd suggest it maybe is slightly easier, possibly a hell of a lot easier, to put your head above the parapets if you're a woman, but I agree.
Well, having said that, the women I know, some whose names I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
When they put their head above the parapet, I mean, I can't remember what it's Dr. Liz Bates or Professor Nicola Kivan, when she was addressing an international conference on domestic violence in Germany. There was a bomb threat to the building.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, and they
are subject to abuse. I've no doubt about
they're
that.
subject to some of the worst smears, and you know, it's remarkable this sort of the extremely gendered type of attacks that they experience from feminists and the sort of accusations. So I'm not, you know,
where would this
not remotely
stressing that?
Yeah, it's more kind of just in terms of the kind of, you know, just in a room, even feeling brave enough to say something.
That's right. Oh, exactly that. That shuts up a lot of people. Yeah. Where I want to pick issue with you fractionally is
go ahead.
The word feminist.
Okay.
I consider the word feminist a complete handicap to be using, generally speaking, in this business, because by using it, if I were to use it, you are attacking all women who believe in equality. When in fact, of course, what's happened is that a small percentage, a toxic smaller percentage, have hijacked the entire agenda.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course.
It was once about equality, I believe. Others can say otherwise, but that's my belief. And there's a need for it, no doubt. And there still is a need in places. But it's become a perversion of what it was once meant to be. And now, as far as I'm concerned, with Dr. Charlotte Prugman and the like, it is a pure gender supremacist movement with weaponizing of children and vulnerable women to achieve their aims. Because what they want is that men are not allowed to cross-examine in court, are not allowed to give evidence effectively in court, cannot participate in court, cannot be involved in their children's upbringing. Some judge said many, many years ago, with the demise of capital punishment, the worst sentence you can pronounce upon a man is to deprive him of any relationship with his children.
Yeah.
And they consider that their absolute foreign duty. Claire Waxman, Dr. Charlotte Prugman, all the ones, the allegation, the cover of convenience, that's it, guilty. And you're gone. So how they can be allowed to maintain their positions as lawyers, as victims commissioners for one of the largest cities in the world and a great city overall, is absolutely staggering. And the reason being, of course, is there is no effective political opposition to it.
Yeah. And
no scrutiny.
So much of it is to do with fear or the impression that if a counter argument is presented, it will be, you know, kind of shot down or viewed as whether it's sexist.
Well, nobody in the public sector can present a counter argument because you're going to be subject to harassment allegations the week after.
Yeah.
All right. So that's well known. That includes the entire university system, virtually, when I call the public sector. So then you're left with the self-employed. Well, how many of them are prepared to do anything about it?
Yeah.
And nearly everybody. I mean, I employ nobody and I'm employed by nobody.
Yeah.
And I protect myself quite well. My biggest fear is not that someone will try and put a few lumps in my skull when I used to be going to the meetings regularly and when there's no one where they were every week. I used to always make certain I carry my shoulder bag in one hand and a paper in the other hand, because I didn't want to happen to me what happened to Mark Pearson, a guy I know quite well. You may know his case where he was accused of penetration of a woman walking across Waterloo platform at busy rush hour with a bag in one hand, and the CPS had freezed the frame so that technically within a minute he had the opportunity to do it.
Yeah.
Now, that's my biggest concern, you see. And then, of course, the hyenas will be on top of it about leading fathers' rights, whatever, you know, not fathers' rights and children's rights. So I see that as being my biggest threat.
Yeah.
Because I have helped Martin Daubney and a couple of others with various articles over the years, and they've never been questioned because they're accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. I've
had no real attempts to slander me or take me down. There's a website dedicated to me by a non-practicing barrister, but it's so well written, and it quotes a lot of my writings from the past on other subjects, on other venues, and may impressed by me writing.
And may what, sir?
And of course, the ultimate allegation against me is that I'm a men's rights activist, which I'm not.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's, that term is used to smear.
If that's all she has to throw at me.
You believe in rights for human beings. My goodness, it's such a crazy allegation. Vincent, listen, thank you very much. I want to kind of wind it down, but I just want to give you an opportunity if there's anything you feel that we haven't covered or you want to say.
In this business, one could speak forever,
Sure.
And it's irrelevant. All I will say to this is to fathers, to aunts, to grandparents, and indeed to mothers themselves, is that there's a desperate need to change the UK from being the bottom of international league tables on children's outcome and welfare in the family courts to within 5 years be at the average. There's no legitimate reason why that cannot occur. I'm totally dedicated to removing what I call child endangering malpractice, apart from my volunteer work with families and fathers, which is helping them through their trauma. And I intend to be doing this for whatever length of time I've left on this earth. For some ridiculous reason or not, I seem to have found a role and a niche that kind of suits me. Madness, just as you have with your work.
Everybody has a purpose in life, and you have a very important purpose, I believe. And I also believe that and hope that you're going to be around for many years to come.
Well, ditto. I hope to be talking to you in a year or two at a later stage when we will have more. And I thank you for having the courage to bring this subject to the open and for other videos of whatnot you produced, because it is a very important library, and through time, the importance will become greater.
Yeah, that's what I believe. I think kind of, one of my philosophies is that, kind of change can happen very quickly. And we're from Ireland, so we've seen that change can, kind of.
Berlin Wall, 1989, 1 month, gone.
Absolutely. And, kind of one of the ways to affect that is just to hold the mirror up to how incredible, how would somebody from the future look at this?
Yeah, the mirror. Oh, I love that expression, the mirror. That's all it takes.
Yeah.
An effective shining of that mirror.
Yeah. So, and if nothing else, I think it gives people the likes of, some of whom we've talked about today, an awareness that people are documenting the words that they say, and they can very quickly, kind of become completely out of step, particularly if you're in the realm of like being a human rights barrister or a member of parliament who's purporting to be, kind of working for an entire constituency. So I think these things are...
And purely gendered and bigoted views.
Yes, indeed. And as promised, I've included links to the website where you can download those free chapters that Vincent mentioned, and of course a link to where you can purchase his book. I'll be back soon for another hopefully fascinating conversation, and in the meantime, all that's left for me to say is a massive thank you once again to Vincent for taking the time to talk to me. Thank you very much for listening, and if you've got this far and got something out of something, then don't forget that you can help support this channel by liking, subscribing, leaving a comment, and sharing my content with a friend. You can also support me on Subscribestar and get a little something in return. And until the next time, don't forget that if you see an elephant,
keep talking. Can't you see it too? There's an elephant in the room.
The Glass Blind Spot is brought to you by you, because it's your views, your likes and your comments that keep this show on the road.